everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be my monthly installment of Would I Repurchase? So that is a series I do here on my channel where I randomize 10 palettes from my collection and then talk about if I would or would not repurchase them. It's a pretty straightforward series here. So if that sounds good to you, if you like palette content, make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't yet. I would love it if you stuck around. But with all that, we're just gonna get started. All right. So, of course, we all know by now that I'm traveling, the background's gonna change. I'm doing the best I can with what I have, and hopefully it turns out semi-decently. I'm sorry if the quality is not the greatest, but I'm trying to just stick to my filming schedule, and like I said, I'm working with what I have. So, everyone kind of does these videos a little bit differently. I will list some content creators down below where I've seen their videos and kind of got inspired to do this series. But the way I like to do it is asking myself if I would repurchase them, having them already been in my collection. So not if they were just released now, I've never used them, but they're in my collection, I've used them, I love or don't love them, and overnight they disappeared. My sister decided she wanted it, she didn't tell me, and it's gone from my collection. Would I repurchase this palette? That's personally how I like to do it, and that's also with the caveat, we're just gonna say that none of these palettes are discontinued, they're all available for purchase. So I have my Tiny Decisions app, and last episode I said that my wheel was updated, but this time it's actually updated. We're starting completely fresh. I had to go through all my videos and make sure I triple checked it that all the palettes in here are good. There are 94 palettes left. Like, I am planning on doing this series until I have no more palettes left. There's still 94 options. So I have a lot of palettes, more than I should have, really. But after I get through all the rest of the palettes, which is going to take a while, my plan is to then go through all my videos, take the ones where I said I would not repurchase them, and then do like a chopping block edition. Let me know if that sounds like fun. That's a ways away, so we have some time, but that's kind of what I'm thinking would be fun as like a follow-up series. And this is all palettes that like I've done speed reviews on, I've tested, so there's more palettes to eventually add. Right now, you know, I'm testing the Beauty Bay Botanical palette. I'm on my second look with this palette right now, so that's not in this wheel. There's others that aren't, so the list will get a little bit bigger as time goes on, but for now, it's fun to do. I like doing it. So like I said, here's my Tiny Decisions app. I am actually just going to insert in a screen recording. That is just a little bit easier for me to show, and then that way I'm not turning my iPad back and forth. So let's just get started pulling the first palette here. And it is going to be Pat McGrath Ritualistic Rose. Bare Minerals Rose, 2 rose palettes. Colourpop Flutter By. Pat McGrath Deep Space Divinity. There's still a lot of Pat McGrath palettes left in my list, I've noticed. So let's keep going. Chanel Ombre de Lune. Natasha Denona Mini Nude. Let's see, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Glaminatrix Nearly Natural. Cosmic Brushes Delicious Delights. Is that 10? I already lost count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2 more. Colourpop The Child. 1 more. Natasha Denona Camel. All right, so I am gonna go pull those palettes and we're gonna get to talking about them. All right, I'm back with all of my palettes. While I was gone, I realized the background was not straight, but it is what it is. Honestly, I just put that back there to block out the window. I am at my parents' house right now, and I'm in like their unfinished attic area. So trust me, you don't want to see what's behind there. It's just unfinished old wood. So I'm going to talk about these in order that they were pulled. The first one is going to be the Pat McGrath Ritualistic Rose. I don't keep all the boxes, but I do when they're special enough from the packaging. And also the shade names are on this box. I find that to be quite annoying. All right, so this is one of the first quads that Pat McGrath came out with, and it's a quad with all of her Blitz Astral shades, so her special shades, and this is what it looks like. I would 100% repurchase this palette. I love it. I wish that Pat McGrath came out with more quads like this, like just her shimmer shadows. That's what people want. And the downfall of Pat McGrath is apparent, unfortunately. I'm not going to stay on this one too long, but I'm very happy with this quad. I keep it in my collection for a reason. I have decluttered Pat McGrath quads in the past, so that one sticks around. Then the next one I have is the Bare Minerals. This is the Gen Nude Rose eyeshadow palette. I purchased this, I remember specifically because Jessica Braun talked about how much she loved these little 6 pans, and they're very cute. I've already talked about the other one that I have, which is the Neutral palette. This is just an easy everyday little 6 pan. I love it for travel. Does it get the use that it should get? No. So because of that, like, I'm going to be very brutal. If this disappeared tomorrow, I don't think I would repurchase it. Having it in my collection, I'm happy to have it. I think it has a place, but it's not one, like, I don't think I'd miss it if it disappeared, if you're getting what I'm saying. Great formula, like, nothing wrong with it, but definitely like a little basic. I have a ton of these shades in other palettes, so it's not something that like I would need to replace. I could easily find it in a different palette. Now, the third palette that I pulled, and the first of the 2 Colourpop palettes, is the Colourpop Flutter By. I remember specifically when this came out. It came out around holiday one year. I want to say 2018, 2019. I love purple. I love butterflies. This packaging is everything I would want in packaging, and that's why I bought it. Yes, it like has these mauve tones, so I'm not upset with the color story, but this is a palette I purely bought for the packaging because the amount of times I've reached for it is quite honestly sad. I just don't reach for my Colourpop palettes as much as I'd like to. I don't know if it's because they're less expensive, but I find myself when like deciding what I want to grab for, just naturally grabbing more expensive things because I feel like I have this urge to make sure I'm getting my money's worth. So like this falls less on the priority. That's like a whole different tangent, I guess. It's not that I don't like this color story. It does have this pressed glitter in here, which is not great, but I don't know. I don't know like how much Colourpop I'll just be buying from the future. I used to buy like every single one of their palettes, and I decluttered all of them except for, 6 or 7 I think I still have in my collection, and I still buy from them. Like I bought the Twilight palette, I bought the 1111 palette, and then some palettes I purchased, like I purchased the Pretty Please palette and I decluttered that after I did a video. I just didn't like the quality. So I'm trying to be very picky with Colourpop, but this is one like I like the packaging more than I like the actual color story, and it's one I don't reach for at all. So I would not repurchase it. We're 2 for 3. 2, no, 1, yes. I should probably separate these so we can go over them. Now, the next one is my second quad from Pat McGrath. I'm surprised I haven't pulled any motherships from Pat McGrath yet. So that's probably going to be in like one video. All the Pat McGrath palettes are going to be pulled at the same time. I'm calling it now. But this is the Deep Space Divinity. Now, I did a video, it's been some time now, but I ranked all of my Pat McGrath palettes. I'll link that video up above, and I'll also link any videos I've done, like dedicated videos on these palettes. I don't think I've done any of the ones we've talked about so far, but coming up there are some palettes. So this one is one of the ones that I did keep clearly because I only have 3 or 4 quads left. I like this color story. It's fairly unique to me. It has like this pretty, this is actually kind of chunky now, this pretty like one of those classic blue brown shades. So I don't hate this palette. I think it's a little bit unique for Colourpop, for Pat McGrath, which is why I kept it over some of the other palettes from her, because this is not one that we see very often anymore. Pat McGrath tends to repeat her shadows. This one, I don't know if this is good still. I don't know if you can see, but this one kind of has like weird, like it's like wet around it. I've never seen that in a shadow before. It still smells fine. If I rub my finger in this shade, maybe it was just the top part. It could also be because I had to put all my stuff upstairs in that attic, which is a very big attic. Like they're remodeling the attic to be like a second floor. So there's 6 rooms up here. Yeah, there's 6 rooms. So it's a very big attic. I just put all my stuff in one of the bedrooms that hasn't been remodeled yet. But maybe it's like a little bit more humid up here because now that I rub my finger on it, it looks fine. Kind of worries me. Anyways, I don't think I'd repurchase this palette either, quite honestly. Like, I'm kind of over it. Again, going based off the assumption I've had it in my collection. So like, would I miss it? No. I don't reach for it that often. Even if this was to like relaunch today, just how I feel about Pat McGrath now, I don't think I'd repurchase it, but it is what it is. Some of these, there's better news coming up. I feel like right now it's been a little bit negative, but I'm trying to be like actually very brutal and honest with myself. Now, the 5th palette is this little Chanel quad, and it is the Ombre de Lune quad. This came out for some kind of holiday collection. It came with their Moon collection. I also purchased the highlighter that was ginormous. I really like this palette, actually. I have one that's very similar, the Mediterranean, that came out a couple years ago, and I like this one more. Yes, it's like very gold, but this shade here, which I used to have, you can kind of see it. It had the Chanel No. 5 bottle embossed on it. This is a very pretty, very gold topper shade. It's pretty, like it's going to give you a basic look, but these limited edition quads from Chanel, I find myself, I gravitate more towards those because I find the color stories to be a little bit more special than just their everyday line or the ones they come out for seasons. I usually like these more, and they're usually the ones that I pick up. So this one, if I lost it, I would repurchase it. Like I said, we're going off the assumption that everything's still available because this palette's definitely not available anymore. But if I lost it, I would miss it. I like having this one in my collection. And the next one, we start my one of 2 Natasha Denonas. This is the Mini Nude palette. And this is a favorite for a lot of people. This is one of Natasha Denona's, I think, first minis that she came out with, if I'm not mistaken. I want to say that it was, and everyone loved it. I'm going to be honest, not my favorite mini. I purchased it at the time because it was one of the only neutral minis that she had, and I love neutrals, so for $25 back then, like, I was going to pick it up, but I don't reach for this one that much because I'm just not as much of a warm tone lover. Like, I find these to be a little bit warmer on the eyes than I want. Like, this is a very coppery shade, and it's just not the right tone of warm for me. And it's really these two. Like, these 3 are fine, but I don't get the use out of this one. This one's definitely like one of the ones on my chopping block, which Natasha Denona is hard because I do like to collect them, but I feel like someone else can maybe get some better use out of this palette. I would not repurchase it. There's other Natasha Denona palettes I would repurchase over and over again, and I have a ton of other neutral palettes. So this is a no for me. The next 2 palettes are indie palettes, the first one being the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural. Unfortunately, this one is no longer available. And let me tell you, like, without hesitation, if this went missing in my collection, I would repurchase it. I love this palette. I held off on this palette for so long because it was expensive. It was coming from Australia. I hadn't purchased anything from Glaminatrix. They came out with the Rich Romantic, and then I think that I purchased the Rich Romantics with this palette at the same time, and I'm so happy that I did because I was one of, I think it was like during the last batch of Nearly Natural before she decided to discontinue it. So I'm very happy that I didn't miss out on this palette. It is beautiful. It's the perfect just neutral with a twist. I love like the greens in here. Green is a pretty neutral but kind of colorful shade for me. You have just the Glaminatrix stunning shimmer formula. It's one of my favorite shimmer formulas in indie brands. I love it so much. So I'm very happy to have this. I know a lot of people still missed out on it, and I wonder, she's kind of been coming back out with palettes in her smaller pan size, which I love. Like, I never got my hands on the Nocturnal palette, and she relaunched that one with her smaller pan size. So I am going to pick that one up. But I'm still kind of on the fence if she's going to do that or not with this palette. It is very well loved, but then she came out with the Barely Basic, and I think that kind of replaced this one, Nearly Natural, Barely Basic. It just makes sense. So I'll just have to wait and see. I did pick up the Barely Basic, just like a little side note. I just got it yesterday, actually, and I'll be doing a comparison with this. But now looking at this, there's maybe less similarities than I was thinking. When I first saw the Barely Basic, I was like, okay, it's kind of similar to this, but maybe less so. Anyways, I would still purchase this and the Barely Basic over and over because I love Glaminatrix formula. So this one's a yes. And then the second indie palette that I have is the Cosmic Beauty Delicious Delights. This is a pastel palette, and I would probably say it's my least favorite Cosmic Beauty palette. No, it's not. Winter Wonderland is. This at least has a place in my collection because I don't have a lot of pastels. And for that reason, I would repurchase it because it's my favorite pastel palette. I just don't get the love out of this one that as much as I should, but I do think it has a place in my collection. What I love specifically about this pastel palette is you get a multi-chrome and you get like some deeper colors. They're not just all these white-based pastels. Like you have a darker shade here, a darker shade here. I am not typically, if I'm going to go for a pastel, going to just do an all pastel look. I'm going to want some depth in the outer corners. So this still kind of gives that to me. Even this shade here, while it's not like a deep shade like this one, it still gives me some depth, this one here. So I like that about this palette. The few other pastel palettes that I have don't have those deepening up shades, and that's why I would pick this one. If it was lost, if all my pastel palettes were lost, this would be the pastel palette that I would repurchase. So this one goes in the yes pile. And now we have two palettes left. We have my second Colourpop palette. So it is actually my favorite Colourpop palette. I believe I ranked all my Colourpop palettes as well, so I'll link that video up above. And this was number one. I love this palette. It probably has the most use out of all of them. I mean, you can kind of see how it's dirty, but I try to keep my makeup pretty clean, so a lot of the times you can't see that much wear on my palettes. But you know, I've definitely gone into this shade. I'm very light-handed with makeup. This is a nice green palette. I like that it's more of like those mutey, sagey palettes. I like that it's not monochromatic. Colourpop, when this palette came out, was doing a lot of monochromatic palettes like the Just My Luck or the Sage the Day. I'm glad I picked this one up as my green palette versus those other two, just because it has more wearable greens, in my opinion. They're not those very bright grass green greens like in Just My Luck. Plus you have some browns here. You have like an inner corner shade here. So overall, I love this palette. Like I said, it's my favorite Colourpop palette and definitely the one I think of when I think of Colourpop. So if this went missing from my collection, I definitely would repurchase it. And then my very last palette is the Natasha Denona Camel palette. So this might have come out before the mini nude. I don't know. She doesn't do these like larger 5 pans anymore. Probably because people weren't just spending the money on them. They were like $50, I want to say, and $25 for this is much better price. These are very similar. The only difference is this is more of a neutral brown, and for that reason, I would repurchase this. I actually use this a lot more. I remember I lived in the Philippines for 2 years. I was only supposed to live there for like 3 to 6 months, and it turned into 2 years. So I brought a very small makeup bag with me, and this was one of the palettes that I brought with me. So I love this palette a lot. It's basic, it's simple, but it does the job, and they're still great formula. Like, I can still pull this palette and know I'm gonna get a good quality look out of it. I like that Natasha Denona went to minis, but this is a really great palette, and I'm glad that I have it. It's just the perfect no think about palette for me. It's still quite small, you know, it's not as small as the mini, but it's still, you know, the size of my hand here. So it's still good for travel. I'm happy I have it, and I would actually repurchase this one as like a travel palette if it went missing out of my collection, especially over the mini nude. So that brings our total. Let's see. Oh, we have a positive video today because I thought we had more misses than hits. I have 4 palettes that I would not repurchase: the Bare Minerals Rose, the Colourpop Flutter By, the Deep Sea Divinity, and the Mini Nude. And then for the ones that I would repurchase, so 6 of the 10, I have the Chanel Ombre de Lune, the Pat McGrath Ritualistic Rose, Glaminatrix Nearly Natural, if I can hold things the right way, Cosmic Beauty Delicious Delights, Colourpop The Child, and Natasha Denona Camel Palette. So, okay, feeling a little bit more positive because the beginning was a little bit rough going into this. Anyways, that is this episode of Would I Repurchase? Let me know if you agree with me, disagree with me, and just all your thoughts down below. This is where I'm going to leave you all, though. I hope you're having a good one, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, everyone.